The air hung heavy and thick at the dusty railroad station in Redemption Gulch, a town aptly named for the slim chance of solace it offered. The oppressive August heat shimmered off the tracks, baking the grit into every pore. A cacophony of shouts, whinnies, and the occasional clank of metal filled the afternoon, as a small crowd gathered for a station auction. Mostly it was horses and tack, worn saddles and rusty tools. The detritus of lives lived hard on the frontier. Among the sparse onlookers stood Silas, a man of few words and even fewer expressions. His sun-weathered face was a map of quiet determination, his eyes the color of distant prairie smoke, constantly scanning, assessing. He was a cowboy, pure and simple, his existence tied to the rhythm of the land and the needs of his small, isolated ranch. He wasn't looking for trouble or even companionship, just a sturdy mare to replace his aging one. Then the auctioneer's booming voice cut through the drone, introducing the next lot. And here we have a rare acquisition, a Comanche squaw, captured near the Pecos, strong and resilient, ready for work. A hush fell, quickly replaced by murmurs of shock and disgust. Caged like an animal beside two restless mares, a woman knelt on the straw-covered ground. Her hands were bound, her buckskin dress torn, but her posture, even in degradation, was one of defiant pride. Her dark eyes, though shadowed by fear, held a fire that pierced the haze of the afternoon. Silas felt a jolt, something deeper than surprise. He'd seen plenty of brutality on the frontier, but this felt different. It was the sheer dehumanizing casualness of it, the way she was presented as property, no different from the horses. A cold anger tightened his jaw. He didn't know why, but as the first bids were shouted, a quiet resolve settled in his chest. His hand, calloused from years of gripping reins and tools, slowly lifted. 50, he rasped, his voice cutting through the rising din, low but firm. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. This quiet cowboy, bidding on a Comanche woman. The bidding intensified, fueled by curiosity and greed, but Silas held firm, each of his bids measured, relentless. Finally, the auctioneer's voice boomed. "Going once, going twice, sold, to the gentleman in the dusty hat." The gavel slammed down, a sound that echoed like a shot in the sudden silence, sealing her unexpected fate. Silas, for the first time in a long time, felt the bewildering weight of a decision he hadn't fully understood, but knew, somehow, was right. If you're gripped by this tale of an unexpected fate, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of human connection. The stares followed them like hungry vultures as Silas led his new, silent acquisition away from the railroad station. The Comanche woman, still bound at the wrists, walked with a rigid, almost defiant posture, her head held high despite the chains. She cast no glance back at the morbidly curious crowd, nor did she look directly at the man who had just bought her. Silas, for his part, ignored the whispers and muttered comments, his focus solely on the road ahead. He untied her from the post, handing her the reins of one of the horses he'd purchased, a gentle bay mare, and motioned for her to mount. She hesitated for a moment, then, with a fluid grace born of a lifetime on horseback, swung herself into the saddle. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as they rode out of Redemption Gulch, leaving the last vestiges of civilization behind. The only sounds were the rhythmic thud of hooves on the parched earth and the creak of saddle leather. The landscape stretched endlessly before them, a vast, ochre-colored canvas of scrub brush, stunted mesquite, and distant hazy mountains. Dust devils danced on the horizon, mirroring the turbulent silence between the two riders. Silas kept a watchful eye on her, noting her unfathomable stillness. She rode with an innate connection to the horse, her body swaying subtly with its gait, her eyes fixed on some unseen point, far beyond the arid plains. Hours passed under the relentless sun. Thirst gnawed, and the dry air rasped in their throats. Finally, Silas reined in his horse by a trickling creek bed, its water barely a whisper over the stones. He dismounted, and without a word, took a tin canteen from his saddlebag. He walked over to her, his movements slow and deliberate. Her eyes, wary and guarded, watched his every motion. He offered her the canteen, its metal cool against his calloused hand. She stared at it, then at him, a flicker of suspicion in her dark gaze. "Water?" he grunted, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You need it." She hesitated, her gaze piercing, as if trying to decipher his intentions. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she reached out, her fingers brushing his as she took the canteen. She drank deeply, her throat working, but still, no word passed her lips. He then offered her a piece of dried jerky. She looked at it, then at him again, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes before she took it, her acceptance still laced with a deep-seated caution. Even in these simple acts, the vast chasm between them remained, a testament to her past and his own stoic nature. Yet a fragile, unspoken understanding had just begun to stir beneath the surface of the silent desert. As twilight painted the western sky in hues of orange and deep violet, Silas found a sheltered spot beneath a lone, gnarled cottonwood. The air, though still warm, began to lose its intensity, and a faint breeze stirred the dry leaves. He dismounted, unsaddled his horse, and then, with a glance at the woman, gestured towards a patch of relatively clear ground. She dismounted stiffly, her movements betraying a weariness she had meticulously hidden throughout the day. Silas set about building a small fire, the crackle of kindling a welcome sound in the encroaching darkness. The flames cast dancing shadows, illuminating their faces in turn. He cooked some beans and coffee, the aroma mingling with the scent of sagebrush and wood smoke. He placed a tin plate of food near her, then sat a respectful distance away, eating his own meal in silence. The vastness of the prairie at night, with only the stars for company, was both humbling and isolating. After they had eaten, Silas cleared his throat, the sound rough in the quiet. "My name's Silas," he offered, his voice low. He pointed to himself, then to her. "You—" She stared at him, her eyes unblinking in the firelight. A long moment passed, thick with unspoken history and cultural chasms. She made no sound, offered no gesture. Silas didn't press. He understood that trust, if it were to come at all, would not be forced. He gestured towards the hobbled horses. "They're good," he said, trying again, hoping to find common ground in the shared language of the plains. She followed his gaze, her expression unreadable. He could feel her apprehension, a tangible weight in the air between them. He imagined her fears, of violence, of further indignity, of a future completely alien to her. His own mind wrestled with the strangeness of the situation. He was a lone man, now with an unexpected silent companion, a woman from a culture so often at odds with his own. Had he made a mistake? The thought flickered, but then he recalled the raw injustice of the auction block, and the feeling faded. Suddenly, a coyote's mournful howl pierced the night close by. The woman flinched, a subtle tremor running through her. Silas's hand instinctively went to the rifle leaning against his saddle. He scanned the darkness, his senses alert. When he looked back at her, her eyes were wide, fixed on the shadows beyond the firelight. For a brief moment, their shared vulnerability, their shared humanity in the wild, untamed land, seemed to bridge the chasm between them, creating a fragile, tentative truce. The sun, a blazing orb in the eastern sky, found Silas and the woman already on the trail. The vast, flat expanse slowly began to give way to rolling hills, dotted with hardy junipers and cedars. By late afternoon, a faint plume of smoke curled on the horizon, signaling Silas's modest ranch. It was nothing grand, a sturdy log cabin, a small corral, a well, and a patch of cultivated land. But it was his, built with his own hands, a testament to years of tireless labor. As they drew closer, Silas saw the familiar lines of his home, a simple haven in the wilderness. He glanced at the woman, wondering what she made of it. Her eyes, usually so guarded, seemed to soften, taking in the small, functional structures. Perhaps the sight of a fixed dwelling, however humble, offered a modicum of stability after days of uncertainty. He dismounted, and she followed suit, her movements still graceful, but carrying a weariness that had settled deep in her bones. Inside the cabin, it was spare but clean. A crude table, 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, and a bedroll. Silas lit the lantern, chasing away the shadows. He gestured towards a clean blanket near the fireplace. "You can rest," he said, his voice softer than usual. He then walked to the small pantry, pulling out some dried meat and cornmeal. He wasn't sure what she was accustomed to, but he offered what he had. While he started a fire to cook a simple supper, the woman moved around the cabin with a quiet curiosity. She touched the smooth, worn wood of the table, ran her fingers over the rough-spun blankets. Her initial apprehension seemed to lessen, replaced by a cautious exploration. As Silas stirred the cornmeal mush, he felt her eyes on him. He looked up, and for the first time her gaze held less suspicion and more contemplation. Then a sound, soft and hesitant, broke the silence that had defined their journey. "Aiyana," she murmured, her voice a low melodic whisper, like the rustle of prairie grass in the wind. She pointed to herself. "Aiyana." Silas froze, his hand still on the spoon. The name hung in the air, a beautiful, unexpected gift. "Aiyana," he repeated slowly, tasting the foreign syllables on his tongue. He nodded, a genuine if small smile touching the corners of his lips. "Silas," he reiterated, pointing to himself. Aiyana nodded, her lips curving into the barest hint of a smile in return. It was a fragile beginning, a single word exchanged, but in that shared moment, a crucial layer of distrust peeled away. She was no longer just the woman, but Aiyana, and the simple act of naming marked the very first step towards an unspoken trust. Are you captivated by Aiyana's journey of resilience and the unfolding bond with Silas? Subscribe now to follow every twist and turn of this epic tale. The days at Silas's ranch settled into a routine, a quiet rhythm of chores and shared silences. Aiyana, now with a name and a small sense of belonging, slowly began to unfurl, though the weight of her past remained a heavy shroud around her. Often, Silas would find her staring out across the vast plains, her eyes distant, her face etched with a profound sorrow. He saw the flicker of old fires in her gaze, images that haunted her. She would sometimes flinch at sudden noises or shy away from rapid movements, betraying the trauma of her capture. One evening, as Silas mended a bridle by the dim lamplight, he heard a choked sound from Aiyana's sleeping pallet. She was murmuring in her native tongue, her body restless. He watched, helpless, as she relived fragmented nightmares, flashes of her village, the scent of smoke, the terrified cries of her people, the brutal hands that had dragged her away. He could piece together the story without words, a raid, the shattering of her peaceful life, the terror of being taken captive, stripped of her freedom and dignity. Silas understood then, more clearly than before, the depth of her wounds. He knew his patience wasn't just a virtue, but a necessity. He couldn't demand her story, nor could he force her healing. All he could offer was a sanctuary, a place where she might, eventually, feel safe enough to put down roots again. Her adaptation to his world was a slow, sometimes frustrating process for both of them. Aiyana, used to the fluidity of nomadic life, found the strictures of the ranch confining. She struggled with the tools, the purpose of each implement. She didn't understand the concept of property as he did, or the constant need to protect boundaries. Silas, in turn, had to curb his own ingrained habits, learning to appreciate her intuitive connection with the land, her deep respect for the natural world that he, as a rancher, often sought to control. Their internal conflicts were subtle, but ever-present. Aiyana wrestled with the shame of her situation, the fear that accepting help from a white man meant abandoning her heritage. Silas battled his own ingrained prejudices, the subtle biases of his upbringing, in a world that often saw Comanche people as savages. He had to remind himself constantly that she was not a possession, but a human being, with a spirit as fierce and free as the wild horses she resembled. Each small gesture of trust, each shared glance of understanding, was a victory, slowly eroding the walls built by fear and the bitter weight of the past. As weeks turned into months, a quiet intimacy began to bloom between Silas and Aiyana, nurtured by shared labor and unspoken understanding. The ranch, once a solitary bastion, now held the subtle hum of two lives intertwined. Mornings began with the scent of coffee and the low murmur of Silas's voice explaining a task. Aiyana, in turn, showed him how to identify edible plants on the prairie, how to read the nuanced signs of the weather, and shared the intricate patterns of her people's beadwork with silent, graceful hands. They learned to communicate in a unique blend of broken English, Comanche words, and gestures. Silas's vocabulary slowly expanded to include terms for the wind, for stars, for the spirit of the land, as taught by Aiyana. She, in turn, picked up words like water, horse, and safe, each new sound a tiny bridge across the chasm of their different worlds. The silences between them were no longer strained, but comfortable, filled with the soft sounds of daily life, the creak of the porch swing, the distant lowing of cattle, the shared rhythm of their breathing. A subtle, undeniable attraction began to weave its way into their interactions. It wasn't born of grand romantic gestures, but of quiet respect and growing admiration. Silas found himself drawn to Aiyana's quiet strength, the fierce dignity she carried despite all she had endured. He admired her resilience, the flashes of unexpected humor that sometimes lit her dark eyes. Aiyana, in turn, began to see past Silas's stoic exterior to the deep current of kindness and unwavering integrity beneath. His quiet protectiveness, his patient teaching, and his respect for her heritage chipped away at her guarded heart. A shared glance, a hand brushing accidentally while working, a fleeting smile, these were the subtle whispers of their nascent feelings. However, the isolated tranquility of the ranch could not protect them entirely from the outside world. Rumors, like dust motes carried on the wind, began to reach the small, prejudiced community of Redemption Gulch. The story of the quiet cowboy who bought a Comanche woman at auction and, worse, was keeping her, began to spread. Whispers turned to grumbles, grumbles to veiled threats. Silas sensed the shift in the air whenever he rode to town for supplies. The averted gazes, the hostile stares, the cold shoulders. He knew it was only a matter of time before the whispers escalated, before the small-minded prejudices of the frontier came knocking directly at his cabin door. The inevitable knock came on a crisp autumn morning. Silas was mending a fence when he saw Sheriff Brody and two local ranchers approaching. Aiyana, tending her herb garden, sensed the shift and moved closer to Silas, her stance alert. "Silas," Sheriff Brody began, his voice gravelly, "we've been hearing talk about your arrangement here." His gaze swept over Aiyana with unconcealed disapproval. The ranchers exchanged hardened glances. Silas straightened, radiating quiet defiance. "What arrangement, Sheriff?" "The Comanche woman," one rancher spat, contempt in his tone. "Folks say you bought her like property, and now she's living here. It ain't right, Silas. Causes trouble." "She ain't property," Silas stated, his voice edged with steel. "She's Aiyana. This is her home now. I bought her to give her a chance, not to own her." He faced the ranchers directly. "She's harmed no one. She works. She's a good woman." Aiyana, understanding the gist, stepped slightly forward. Her chin held high, her eyes met their prejudiced stares with unflinching dignity. She understood their judgment and would not cower. Her silent strength was a powerful retort. Sheriff Brody shifted. "Look, Silas, folks are getting riled. It's the law. A woman like her. She needs a place, a status. Unless there's a formal arrangement, a marriage perhaps, that'd settle things, legally. Give her a place, give you both some peace." The suggestion hung in the air, unexpected and profound. Silas looked at Aiyana, then back at the sheriff. It was a stark solution, but perhaps the only path to true protection. He saw the cold logic and the immense implications for them both. The challenges are mounting for Silas and Aiyana. Don't miss how their bond withstands the test of prejudice. Subscribe and be part of their journey. The three riders eventually left, their warnings heavy in the air. Silas turned to Aiyana, his face grim but vulnerable. He knew what he had to do. "Aiyana," he began, his voice low and rough. He took a deep breath, searching for words to convey protection, not possession. "The sheriff," he said, "we need to make it right. Official. I want to marry you." Aiyana's eyes widened, shock and disbelief crossing her features. Marry a white man? A man who had bought her? Was this another chain? Silas quickly raised a hand. "Not to own you, Aiyana. Never that. To protect you. To give you a name, a legal place. To stop them from taking you or bothering you. This is your home now. I want to keep it that way. For you to be safe. Free." His voice was earnest, undeniably sincere. She turned away, walking to the edge of the porch, her back to him. The idea was overwhelming. It was a proposal born of necessity, not romance, yet she had seen Silas's kindness, his unwavering patience, his quiet respect. He had given her dignity and a place to heal. The choice was stark: remain vulnerable or embrace an unimaginable future with this silent, honorable man. After a long, agonizing silence, Aiyana slowly turned back. Her eyes searched his, seeing unvarnished truth and a deep, unexpected well of care. She took a shaky breath, the weight of her decision pressing down. It was a monumental leap of faith, but the alternative felt colder. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Aiyana nodded. "Yes," she whispered, barely audible, but firm. "I will marry you, Silas." News of Silas and Aiyana's impending marriage spread like wildfire through Redemption Gulch, fueling prejudice and gossip. Most saw it as Silas's folly, sure to end in disaster. Whispers followed Silas in town. Bound to come to no good, a white man marrying a savage, unnatural. Aiyana, insulated at the ranch, still felt the palpable coldness from townswomen. Silas ignored the snide remarks, his jaw set. His focus was on Aiyana, on his promise. There were no grand preparations. Their union was pragmatic, a shield against a hostile world, but no less profound. Silas found a traveling circuit preacher, a tired man who reluctantly agreed to perform the ceremony. In the days leading up to it, their connection deepened. They spoke more, sharing pasts and hopes. Aiyana haltingly shared fragmented memories of her life before the raid. Dances, hunts, elder wisdom. Silas spoke of his solitary journey west, building his ranch, and finding satisfaction in the land. They sat by the fire late into evenings, often in comfortable silence. Aiyana made Silas a small, intricately beaded pouch, a traditional gift. Silas carved her a wooden bird, a simple token of his growing affection. These were not grand romantic gestures, but quiet acts of care, promises exchanged through hands and hearts. The prejudice, rather than tearing them apart, forged an even stronger bond. The weather mirrored their journey. Oppressive summer heat had given way to crisp autumn air. Days were shorter, the sun setting earlier, painting the sky with fiery hues. As the appointed day dawned, a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and impending change. By late afternoon, the western sky blazed with a magnificent sunset, setting the stage for their improbable union. As the sun began its final, majestic descent, casting long, dramatic shadows, Reverend Elias stood awkwardly in front of Silas's cabin. His eyes darted nervously between Silas, stoic, and Aiyana, who stood beside him. She wore a simple, clean buckskin dress, her dark hair braided with feathers, a subtle nod to her heritage. Her face held a tremor of vulnerability, a mix of apprehension and hope. The ceremony was brief, stripped of all fanfare, performed under the vast sky. Reverend Elias mumbled through familiar words. Silas's gaze, however, remained fixed on Aiyana. When it was time for the vows, he looked into her eyes, speaking directly to her. "I, Silas," he said, low but clear, "take you, Aiyana, to be my wife, to protect you, to honor you, and to build a life with you in this place always." Aiyana, her heart pounding, repeated her part in halting English. "I, Aiyana," she echoed, soft but steady. "Take you, Silas, to be my husband, to walk beside you, to share this land, and to make our home together as long as the sun rises." Her eyes, usually guarded, now held an unshakable resolve. The Reverend closed his book. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Silas hesitated. Then, slowly, gently, he reached out, his calloused hand touching her cheek. He leaned down, and his lips met hers in a tender, lingering kiss. It was a kiss not of passionate romance, but of quiet promise, of shared understanding, of a solemn vow made under the vast crimson canvas of the setting sun. In that moment, prejudices, painful pasts, and uncertain futures seemed to fade, replaced by the profound, simple truth of their connection. As the last rays dipped below the horizon, Silas and Aiyana stood together, bound by an improbable union. They had faced immense obstacles, and more would come. But as they walked hand in hand towards their cabin, they walked not as buyer and bought, nor as two separate cultures, but as husband and wife, embarking on a new, uncharted journey. Their story was a testament to resilience, to the quiet power of human connection, and to the enduring hope that even in the harshest of lands, love could find a way to bloom. And so, Silas and Aiyana's journey begins anew, bound by an unexpected love forged in the heart of the Old West. If this powerful story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button to join our community and never miss another incredible narrative.